For the past few years, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio has been one of the best four-door performance cars on sale. In fact, I reckon it's actually one of the best sports saloons of all time. But now, Audi reckons it's knocked the Alfa Romeo off its perch with this, the RS5 Sportback.
The RS5 has been around as a coupe since 2017, but Audi has now introduced this more practical Sportback version with a pair of rear doors. It has a hatchback boot rather than a saloon like the Alfa Romeo, but that's a minor detail. These cars occupy exactly the same niche in the performance car sector. For now, that niche belongs to the Giulia Quadrifoglio, which is about as close to a four-door Ferrari saloon car as you will ever see. Before we get into the details, have you subscribed to the CarGurus YouTube channel yet? We post new and used car reviews, helping you work out which car is right for you. Go on, tap that subscribe button.
Now, that Ferrari association probably seems tenuous. It's not, actually, because this car was developed partly by a handful of on-loan Ferrari engineers. This engine, meanwhile, is related to the twin-turbo V8 that you will find in the Ferrari Portofino. However, this is a cut-down version, so it's a 2.9-litre V6, missing 2 cylinders, but it's still got a pair of turbochargers. It's rated at 503 brake horsepower and 443 pounds-foot of torque.
The Giulia Quadrifoglio is one of the lighter cars of its type, at 1,524 kilograms. Rear-wheel drive only, it'll crack 62 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds and run on to a mighty 191 miles per hour. Its gearbox is an 8-speed automatic.
Would you believe it? We've got another 2.9-litre V6 with a pair of turbochargers, but here, obviously, no Ferrari DNA. It's not quite as potent, this engine either. 444 brake horsepower and the same 443 pounds-foot of torque.
Its big advantage, at least in terms of straight-line performance, is that it delivers drive to all 4 wheels. In the wet, that will make a significant difference. Nonetheless, the RS5 registers the same 3.9-second 0 to 60 time and tops out at 155. Its gearbox is also an 8-speed auto. It's pretty much honours even when it comes to price. The Alfa Romeo costs from £63,540, while the Audi is only slightly more expensive at £64,735.
If this car has a weakness, it's unquestionably the interior. Frankly, it doesn't feel 60 grand's worth. Some of this switch gear just doesn't feel in any way premium. The overall dash design, I don't know, it's the sort of thing you'd expect to find in a sort of mid-ranking hatchback rather than a really premium sports saloon like this. However, the stuff that really matters, for me, is just about spot on. Seating position, lovely and low, sitting on the deck of the car. The steering wheel comes all the way out. Lovely steering wheel as well with a bit of Alcantara at the top here and some carbon trim. And the seat, that's really supportive. Big bolsters. It's comfortable to sit in. When you look at the back of them, they've got this gorgeous carbon panel. The stuff that matters in here is good.
The Alfa Romeo's infotainment system is just about fit for purpose, but the scroll wheel feels cheap and the graphics are clunky. This isn't the sort of infotainment setup you expect to find in a £60,000 plus car.
In terms of cockpit ambiance, the Audi knocks the Alfa Romeo flat out. There's just no comparison, really. This actually isn't the latest generation Audi-style cockpit. So the newest cars, they've got integrated screens here, whereas this one has still got this tacked-on item. But generally, it's a really smart cockpit. A lot of this switch gear just feels lovely. It feels expensive. Lots of really sharp design flourishes. Overall, it just feels like a much more expensive cabin than the Alfa Romeos.
The RS5 seating position is good too, but not quite as nailed on as the Alfas. But its infotainment system is far more advanced. It's not even the latest Audi system, but it feels a generation newer than the Alfas. It uses a similar but much classier feeling scroll wheel, the graphics are far better and the menus easier to navigate. The configurable virtual cockpit within the instrument binnacle, meanwhile, is very good too.
We'll start in the Alfa Romeo and remind ourselves why it's the incumbent, why it's the best car in its class at the moment. Now, these cars would be no good to anybody if they were brilliant and exciting to drive on a winding B road, but then are total pain in the neck the rest of the time. This Alfa Romeo is not a pain in the neck. The ride quality is connected. It's quite a firmly sprung car, but it's a very well damped car, so the ride is comfortable. It's easy to drive, the automatic gearbox is smooth. It's not really demanding. Overall refinement is pretty good, but it's a slightly tinny car compared to some of its rivals. So there's pronounced wind and road noise, and you hear stones pinging up inside the wheel arches, that sort of thing. But generally, it's a total doddle to use this car every day.
But with so much power beneath its bonnet, the Alfa has a wild side, a very wild side.
The engine really is pretty special. This V6 that's sort of derived from a Ferrari V8. Once the rear axle has hooked up and it's got some traction, that's when you feel the full 503 brake horsepower. Because before then, the systems are just throttling, just holding the engine back a little bit, and you don't get everything the engine's got to give. But say from third gear onwards, it starts to rip and haul really fast. It's such a characterful engine as well. In dynamic mode or in race mode, it feels razor sharp. The throttle response is really good. It's got plenty of torque all the way through the mid-range, and then a good fizzy top end as well, and it sounds good. You want an Alfa Romeo V6 to sound tuneful, and this one, despite the turbochargers which often muffle the soundtrack, it really does sound good. Gearbox, it's fine really. Doesn't have the snappiness of a DCT, but once you're accustomed to its rhythm, it works really well, and in auto mode it's smooth.
What really makes the Alfa such a special machine is the way it finds its way along a tricky road.
The roads around here are quite lumpy and bumpy, a proper test, a proper workout for a car's chassis. And on these lumpy, bumpy roads, this Alfa just performs beautifully. What I really love is that even in dynamic mode, you can knock the dampers back to the softer setting so that over the lumps and bumps, the car breathes beautifully while still being well controlled. It feels so sophisticated. Actually, this might be a stretch, but it feels a little bit like a Ferrari supercar. Clever in that way. We've had all weathers today. You can probably tell from the exterior footage. It's currently sunny and the road is dry. And this car wears Pirelli P0 Corsa tyres. That's an aggressive tyre. In the dry, bundles of grip, but in the wet, they can be a little bit dicey. But by and large, this car drives beautifully, while the steering is super direct and super sharp. Feels like it's been lifted directly out of a bespoke, purpose-built sports car.
The Giulia Quadrifoglio is so much fun to drive. It's the first car of its type that doesn't feel like a saloon with lots of power, but like a sports car with 4 doors. And the Audi, well, it's got its work cut out.
There's something you need to know about this Audi. It's a bit of a porker. It's 200 kilograms heavier than the Alfa Romeo, and you actually really feel that the moment you start rolling along. Actually, Audi has done a really good job of giving this car a cushioned, pliant, comfortable ride quality to a point. But when you start moving a little bit quicker, there's only so much the suspension can do against all that weight, and so you feel the car thudding and thumping its way along the road rather than gliding serenely. But the counterpoint to all of that is that with so much more sound deadening material throughout the car, it's a much more refined vehicle than the Alfa Romeo. So it's quiet, it's civilized, there's far less wind and tyre noise. It's just a more luxurious kind of thing to be in, I suppose, a bit more like a GT car. It's also very easy to drive. Again, smooth gearbox, light steering, good visibility. Like the Alfa Romeo, you could use it day to day without thinking twice, just to an even greater extent.
The RS5's 4-wheel drive system comes into its own in the wet, but on a dry road, the Giulia feels more urgently accelerative.
This Audi, remember, has got a very similar engine on paper to that Alfa Romeo, both turbocharged 2.9 litre V6 petrol engines, but actually in practice they're quite different. This Audi's engine feels very crisp and clinical and linear, and it's a very, very effective power plant, but for me it lacks some of the Alfa Romeo's character. I think this RS5's engine, right at the top end, it keeps pulling a little bit where the Alfa's begins just to wilt and fade. But nonetheless, it is the Alfa that's got the more characterful, the more sort of engrossing motor. This 8-speed automatic gearbox, again on paper very similar to the Alfa Romeo's 8-speed automatic gearbox, but this one just feels slightly snappier, slightly more responsive. This particular test car has got the optional sports exhaust, and so you do get quite a nice poppy sound, particularly on upshifts. But again, it's the Alfa Romeo's engine that is more inherently musical. There's some trickery going on with this car's exhaust. The Alfa Romeo just is more tuneful by its nature.
It's when the road begins to twist and turn that you really notice the difference between these two cars, in that sense that Audi cannot live with the Alfa Romeo.
This RS5 Sportback is very much true to form. It favours that typical Audi poise and stability and security and wet weather performance over the kind of agility and adjustability that makes the Alfa Romeo so engaging and so special to drive. That means the balance is very much nose-led, so it's an understeer balance right at the limit of grip, and there's no real adjustability. It means the steering feels quite slow, particularly compared to the Alfa Romeo, and it's muted. There's no real sense of feedback through the steering wheel at all. I think in overall terms, along a winding country B road, this Audi is no slower than the Alfa Romeo. That hardly matters. It's just not important, is it, how quick in absolute terms a car is. What matters is how engaging and how rewarding that car is. And in that sense, this Audi doesn't really get close to the Alfa Romeo.
There isn't a great deal wrong with the RS5. In fact, it's a very desirable car. But if you love the finer points of driving, there can only be one winner.
The Alfa Romeo is a geek's car. It's been designed from the outset not to look flashy, not to feel like it's worth 70 or 80,000 pounds, but to be brilliant fun to drive for people who really care about that sort of thing. It remains, for me, the best four-door performance car on sale. Comment below, let us know if you think we got that verdict right, and remember to subscribe to the CarGurus YouTube channel if you haven't already, and also check out cargurus.co.uk because that's where you'll find a great deal on your next car from a top-rated dealer.